Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you very much, Alberto, Felix, and the whole team of INCIBE. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. This is the first time I'm in León. I love INCIBE. I love the wine, the food, and everything else. And as I said, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. I've been asked to speak about global challenges, international cybersecurity challenges. This is a topic I'm studying in terms of international politics. So my presentation is in English, but I'll try to speak in Spanish. So first I will have a look at the challenges. I have defined them under the sections technologies, actors and their actions, issues related to capacity, confidence and cooperation, and recently the geopolitical context in which we're living. This is an important challenge for us. Then I will be speaking about the nature of the response that we're having internationally to these challenges. Normative, beyond the EU, there's a lot of work being done, and there are interesting initiatives. And we have international works, for example, in the UN, international developments, not only on internet governability, but also about international security. And there are other organizations such as the OCDE, the OSCE, the NATO, the ASEAN, etc. And they're working from different points of view to improve the legal framework and to give some stability to the legal framework at international level. And they are developing policies and strategies. And of course, as you know, there are many operational initiatives. This is not just, and I will not be focusing on that, but we also have operational developments. And then persisting challenges. This is still an important problem. We have some matters in the area of legislation that are still persistent challenges. Let us look at the first part. We have many challenges today, the technologies, there's much insecurity in the design of technology. Then actors and their actions. That's something I will be focusing on. There are actors, non-state actors, who, as we know, are involved in crime and the use of internet and ICT for terrorism. Then we have a growing approach from states who are using ICT for political and military uses in conflict or non-conflict situations. And there's a merger of actors. This is a very complex matter that's being studied at UN level. We have some examples of actors and their actions. I focus a lot on states because that's the gist of the work that I do. We know that we've had DOS and DDoS in Estonia, in Georgia. We have had many attacks against democratic institutions and state institutions. For example, IP theft, industrial espionage. Before, this was just against developed states, Western states, but we see that the emerging economies are also being affected by these attacks. Then we have political espionage. This is, we acknowledge that everybody's doing espionage, but we're looking at the magnitude of this. We also have malware designed to disrupt critical infrastructures. We have difficult situations, such as, for example, the recent attack on the Ukrainian power grid, the German steel mill in 2015, Stuxnet. We are all familiar with these cases. And this, to some extent, represents a turning point. And we realize that we may interrupt or affect critical infrastructure infrastructure, and governments are developing their capacity to fight against this. Then we have incidents that affect access to or the integrity of data. Ransomware attacks such as WannaCry this year, Sony 2015, and Saudi Aramco in 2012. We also have matters related to massive data breaches, Equifax in the US. Recently, we also had in the US and the Justice Department last year, data breaches, OPM in 2015, Sony in 2014, and many other incidents of this time. Then hacking incidents targeting international organizations, and this is an interesting topic. Whenever we have a big event, the day before, or if there is a negotiation, there are attempts to access information and to have this information beforehand and to inform the policies of a government. We also have information operations. This is something that doesn't have to do with cybersecurity, but we are all discussing this. Today, all countries, all institutions are affected, as we heard before and from the previous speakers. And we have a growing number of states developing offensive military cyber capacities and relying on proxies to develop and deploy them, so non-governmental agents. There are some interesting reports, such as the CIC, the list of incidents since 2006. It's an interesting report. And then we have the UND Cyber Index. This is developed by UNIDIR, and it has been ongoing for the past 4 years. So this all leads to a situation of instability, distrust, risk of escalation or miscalculation in the hands of government. And what I'm seeing, what I'm studying, for example, these are the 3 pillars of the UN: human rights, international security, and social and economic development. And there's a lot of overlapping of the different topics. And then in the response, we also have a lot of overlapping situations or issues. There are legal aspects that are there in the different committees of the General Assembly. There are some aspects that are included in the agenda of the Security Council. This is more related to internet and terrorism and crime. But the work that we are doing in terms of how states work on cyberspace is being developed by the first committee of the General Assembly that addresses international security issues. And since 1998, when Russia presented a resolution, they're working on this. First, they were focusing on terrorism and crime, but this has developed, the approach has been expanded, looking at the incidents that have been happening, the threats and attacks that we have had in recent years, in the past 10 years. Russia proposed or introduced a draft resolution on ICT in the context of international security. In this first committee in 1998, as I said, it was adopted without a vote. This resolution has been modified every year. It has been voted within the General Assembly, and the Secretary General presents a report with the views of member states on the issues. The fact is that there are very few governments who actually subject their perceptions to the Secretary General. This year, in August 2017, some 24 governments of 193 submitted their perceptions and the development of the strategies against those things to the UN. It is a problem, but it is increasing. because there were fewer reports before. I'm going to speak about the GGEs. This is a working group, a group of governmental experts on ICT who focus on international security issues. This has to do with the Russian resolution of 1998. And these working groups, each of them have a different mandate, and they have been working since 2004. The first year there was no consensus report. There was a lot of tension regarding the matters that have been included in the final report. They are not binding, these reports, but it is important for other countries to see what kinds of topics are being addressed and what normative recommendations they could draw from this. Their approach has more to do with military and political aspects involving states, even if they do mention the importance of engaging other actors, for example, the private sector, civil society, and other actors in the academia and technical institutions. The mandate from the beginning has been cooperation, confidence, international law, how this is applied to ICT, especially to the negative use of ICTs, and then issues related to norms and capacity. There are many countries in the UN who do not have the capacity to develop systems, and many of them see how there are developments in the EU that are very positive, but these are things that in which many countries are lagging behind. The most important goal of these groups of governmental experts is to maintain peace and security and to secure an open and to ensure an open, secure and peaceful and accessible ICT environment, and to promote the peaceful use of ICT and prevent conflict stemming from the use of these ICTs for evil purposes. In 2010, we did have a consensus report. I think many people think that this is not very relevant, but it is important nonetheless, because for the first time, a group of experts working within the UN managed to confirm the threat and all the questions that I mentioned this morning that are highly problematic and that have to do with how they can interfere with international peace and security. They also acknowledge the states themselves are part of the problem and that they are using ICT in a malintentioned and in a malicious way. Recommendations are few, but they recommend the need to have more confidence and cooperation to ensure stability in the cyberspace. They also highlight some aspects, such as, for example, the risk of misinterpretation that could result from a lack of a shared understanding regarding international norms and the legal framework in which states are working. This could also affect crisis management in the case of an important incident, of a major incident. They also discuss the need for measures to enhance cooperation and the importance of sharing best practices, lessons learned, and how to manage an incident from a cooperational perspective, how to build confidence, reduce risk, and a matter that is not usually addressed, and that has to do with transparency, to share strategies, doctrine, and that's sometimes a difficult aspect. And then they also highlight the importance of collaboration among states and between states and the private sector and civil society. At the same time, and after these first attempts to bring these topics to an international arena, we also have many regional developments. Within the OSCE, the Organization for Safety and Cooperation in Europe, started working in 2011. They began discussing the need for security, and the member states started discussing the need to have some measures for confidence building, CBMs, and as they saw so many incidents involving different European states. In 2012, after 2 years of strong discussions, they adopt the PC decision, and there are measures related to cooperation and confidence building. That is, sharing strategies, sharing contact points at technical and political level. They also start seeing how they can complement the work of the UN. Beyond the UN, the ASEAN Regional Forum, they also started working beyond the OSCE and ASEAN. They started working around this in 2012, and in the different regional levels, they started. They follow they issue the recommendations on cooperation in emergency cybersecurity, and also other groups such as the BRIC group and G7, G20. They all begin to discuss international security and cooperation as key aspects for international security and financial security at global level. During this period, they also start an important number of bilateral meetings and track 1.5 and track 2 dialogues so that they can get to know each other's strategy at a political level. And they also start with some initiatives for capacity building. An example of this, of a complex situation, has to do with the US-Russia hotline 2013. But I don't think that this is being used much at present. In 2013, there is another Union of Governmental Experts report, and here we have a bit more of substance and muscle. For the first time, the group agrees that the existing international law, the UN Charter, and common law, humanitarian law, and human rights law have to be applied to state use of ICTs. There's an initial discussion on norms of state behavior and responsible state behavior in this framework. There's a section of the report dedicated to recommendations on confidence building measures and the exchange of information of confidence and cooperative measures in order to help increase transparency, predictability, and cooperation. And then they focus on cybersecurity capacity building. This is very important because there are several countries represented in the expert group, in the GGE, who do not have capacity to face this. They do not have an important workforce at national level, and they do not have the capacity in general to prevent incidents or attacks and to respond in an adequate fashion. Once again, during this period, in 2013, the OSCE adopts some more confidence-building methods or measures. This is 11 of them. That is notification in the case of an incident and similar measures in this line. They also speak about cross-border cooperation, once again, contact point protection, national POCs, etc. And beyond the OSCE, the OEA, and this will be discussed tomorrow if I'm not wrong, There are some efforts there also in Asia, Africa. There are more efforts, but they're still slow in their implementation. In 2015, this is the report that everybody has been discussing recently, because this is the report that not only underlines what was agreed before, but it also adopts a series, recommends rather, a series of norms for the responsible behavior of states and ICT. These norms are not binding, but they are seen as a framework to avoid confusion, and also how confidence-building measures in the OSCE can help governments in their cooperation, and how cooperation can be made sustainable and substantial when there is an incident. There are many things that are being done in countries independently, but there was no formal framework. So this is a formal framework, and a framework for governments who hadn't made much progress in this area. After that, there's, of course, a lot of work being done outside OSCE. And as I said, we have an emerging framework for the stability and security, in cyberspace, and this has developed throughout the years in terms of international law and confidence building, capacity building, and non-binding or voluntary measures for states. They require engagement of not just governments, of the different governmental structures, but also engagement of the industries and other private partners, the academia and technical community, and civil society. The problem is that we have this whole framework, but we cannot implement it. In 2016, 2017, there was another group of experts. I was the spokesperson, the rapporteur in that group, but we didn't have a consensus report. It was not my fault, though. We managed to work hard, and we managed to bring to the table different ways or strategies of how to implement the recommendations of previous reports, especially regarding the norms, the behavioral norms for states, CBMs, and capacity building. Yet the only problem is that there was no consensus on the issue of international law. Not whether international law applies or not. That was agreed upon several years ago, that this was a fact. But the disagreement was on how we could detail this and have some recommendations so that other governments could follow them, and the implementation of some key aspects such as Article 51 of the UN Charter, measures and countermeasures in response to internationally wrongful acts. This is a specific legal matter, and humanitarian law. There was a group of people, of governments, who wanted more details about this, and others who said no, that we should not have more details because that would be to legitimize the militarization of cyberspace and legitimize issues such as sanctions. Then there was also a disagreement on how to bring the work of the GGs forward within the UN context. So this week, in the first committee, they had a presentation of the outcome of the first working group. There's a lot of silence from governments at this time, and a lot of questions about how to move forward. We have persisting challenges. I have just listed a few. For example, threats and how to manage and mitigate existing and emerging threats and risks. What do we do with the data of the last expert group? As I said before, there's a lot of silence, but some things are being done regionally, and they keep the perspective alive. And then there are some aspects that I have summarized within this how-to section, how to maintain a dialogue, especially between governments and those normative issues around which there is limited consensus, while also ensuring legitimacy and inclusivity in the process, because some governments want to take the discussion out of the UN and others want to keep it within the UN. How to implement what was already been agreed upon within and beyond the UN expert groups with the voluntary norms of state behavior, confidence-building measures, etc. How to build capacity across states, and how to do that when we have competitive models or models that compete with each other, and some countries are going to be lagging behind. How to ensure that the general public, and how to strengthen cooperation among states and between states and other actors when we do have so many normative problems, legal problems, and a lot of disparity in the positions of different governments, even regarding the international framework to be used in cybercrime. And the most important thing for me is how to ensure that the general public interest is at the core of regulatory and normative and other efforts to maintain an open, safe, accessible sphere and peaceful at international level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camino, for your presentation. Now we're going to see a video of the summer boot camp.
Nos enfrentamos a una amenaza global y para ello es necesario trabajar conjuntamente y estar adecuadamente formados, ¿no?, en las últimas técnicas de ciberseguridad. Summer Bootcamp es un evento que tiene este doble objetivo: conocernos a nivel mundial, trabajar juntos y además formarnos e intercambiar experiencias en el ámbito de la ciberseguridad.
Poder conocer las experiencias europeas, tener acceso a las herramientas más avanzadas para evitar y prevenir los ciberataques, poder establecer y fortalecer redes de conocimiento y de colaboración en temas muy importantes para el hemisferio como es la ciberseguridad.
Después de los últimos acontecimientos, con eventos como WannaCry o Petya, estaba claro que el tema de ransomware era uno de los temas a tratar en este evento, pero sin olvidarnos de otros asuntos como el cibercrimen en redes anónimas o los ataques a infraestructuras críticas. Considero que este tipo de formación es fundamental para cuerpos y fuerzas de seguridad del Estado, tanto para actualizar sus conocimientos como para afrontar retos presentes y futuros en el ámbito de la ciberseguridad.
Contamos con expertos de muchas materias, reconocidos internacionalmente y además de muchas temáticas. Hablamos de malware, pentesting, temas de wifi, inalámbricos, con lo cual yo creo que hoy en día podemos decir que es de lo mejor que existe en el panorama actual.
Estuve presente en el Summer Bootcamp 2016, muy positivo en cuanto a las experiencias, al conocimiento, pero fundamentalmente en cuanto al conocimiento de la gente que también participó, las ideas en común. Como consecuencia de eso se constituyó un grupo de apoyo y networking permanente todo el año, incluso siguió funcionando durante estos días acá en paralelo con esta actividad.
Reúne
muchas disciplinas en muy poco tiempo y cubren todos los aspectos que yo necesito para mi trabajo y mucho más también.